Batman has a lot of tragic villains. I think that's part of what makes his rogue gallery so interesting. So many of them are either genuinely redeemable, absolutely insane, or just downright sad in a lot of cases. But today, and in theming with the Halloween season, I want to talk about the tragedy of Clayface. And to be fair, there is a multitude of people that have taken the moniker of Clayface, but today we'll be talking about Matt Hagen, as he is the DCAU's official Clayface. So here I present to you the tragedy of Clayface. Matt Hagen was an extremely successful actor. He had made an entire career out of basically putting himself in his character's shoes and kind of method acting. But that was all taken away from him one day with an accident that left his face completely and utterly scarred. It left him looking horrible, in his own words, and would lead to him not being able to get any roles outside of the Freak or a Monster, or anything that would require covering his face. That was until he was given a cream called Renew You by Ronald Daggett. It was highly experimental, but it was made so that he could reshape his face into being anything he wanted. This allows Matt to shape his face into anything he wants and allows him to continue doing his work as an actor. As a matter of fact, his work as an actor has excelled due to the facial cream, allowing him to make himself look however he pleases. This is something that has taken his career to new heights, but has also left him in a particular set of ruin. In order for Matt to keep getting the Renew You that he needs to continue to land acting roles and to continue to live a normal life, in his words, he keeps having to do jobs for Daggett, ones that are shady. For example, our ever lovable Lucius Fox has data on Renew You that suggests that it is not only dangerous, but highly addictive. And so Matt is going to pose as Bruce Wayne and attempt to get the data back from Lucius Fox. That way Daggett can continue to make his Renew You formula, all without any of those petty and pesky hurdles, about consumer safety or caring about the customer. Bad. So instead, he uses Matt Hagen as a pseudo stand-in because he's a great actor and he can realistically make himself look just about any way he wants to. And when Matt Hagen is no longer succeeding and Daggett no longer has use for him, he intends to take him out permanently. And in a fit of extreme poetic justice, he has his boys decide to take him out, but his boys decide to take him out in a very unique way, which is to essentially overload Daggett with the exact same cream that he has been pining for this entire time, because he is hopelessly addicted to this facial cream, to Renew You. He truly needs it to function regularly, and so they thought it would be kind of funny if they absolutely douse him in Renew You until, he's no longer a functioning member of society. Yeah, this is pretty sickening. And when we see Matt Hagen the next time, he has been irreparably transformed into what would be known as Clayface. Matt was a super successful actor even before he ended up with the Renew You formula. He seemingly had it all and had everything. And he even had a stunt double that he valued as being close to him, or at least the stunt double valued their relationship highly. Throughout the episode, we are constantly shown that Matt is struggling with addiction. He's addicted to the Renew You formula. He's addicted to the idea of not being a monster. He is being sold a cure to a problem that the world had been given to him. And unfortunately, that cure came with a lot of consequences. Those being having to work for Daggett, a man that is ostensibly horrible and should be nowhere near making pharmaceutical and or addictive products, and ultimately does not care about how those products harm those people around him because he's a businessman, and that's what businessmen do. They don't care about people, they see numbers on a board, and that's his job. And Matt Hagen just became one of those numbers on the board, a very, very lucrative number, as Matt Hagen was a famous actor, someone who could disappear into the role of whoever he portrayed. And that comes with the look of Was Matt Hagen ever really himself throughout a majority of any of these episodes? Specifically this first one. He is always slipping into the back of a role, and the few times where he was genuinely being himself, he was miserable. And he was scared, and he was addicted, and he was angry and aggressive and miserable. I harp on that word because he was miserable then, and now you can only imagine how much more miserable he's going to be now. This episode, in my opinion, serves as a little bit of a light towards the idea of selling consumers a product that is meant to help them and meant to fix issues in their lives, but ultimately the person who is selling you that product is going to take it further and further. I think of this Black Mirror episode, which was all about the idea of taking a person's consciousness and keeping them alive in the cloud and through their physical body as long as you paid a premium every month. They wouldn't have Alzheimer's, they wouldn't have dementia, they'd always remember as long as you paid a premium. So for $9.99 a month, you'll be set. And then it was $12.99, and then it was $15.99, and then it was $100 a month, so on and so forth. And we see that with a lot of our subscription services. Netflix is continuing to go up in price despite losing a ton of TV shows. We see that happening with Hulu introducing these new, hey, thanks for paying me $8 a month, but you're still gonna watch ads on your videos. We see it with how YouTube likes to place ads on videos all the time. Even when I go in and edit it and say, hey, I want 3 ads on this video, they'll come back a few days later and put like 8, and I have to go fix that again. The tragedy of Clayface doesn't start in some fiery explosion like Harvey Dent. It doesn't start by some failing of our mental institutions. No, it starts by the exploitation of the base need of a person through a consumeristic product. And that is how the tragedy of Clayface began. Now, this was a 2-part special, something that BTAS was very fond of. So in the second episode, we get to see the fallout of Matt becoming Clayface, and we also get a little bit of background as to how he was approached exactly by Daggett to get the cream that would one day become his ruin.
Just like I thought I was when Daggett came to visit me at that clinic of his, asking me to be his first test subject. How could I say no? He told me his Renew You formula could do in minutes what plastic surgery would take years to accomplish.
It is, as most products are, selling him a solution to a problem that he has. Except the solution to the problem ended up being a highly addictive substance that was controlled by a very corrupt man, who was trying to hide the fact that the substance was potentially dangerous, mind-altering, and addictive. And with Matt being fully transformed into Clayface, he's now discovering that there are a few benefits and drawbacks to being Clayface. He can technically transform himself into anything he wants, but it's to a limited degree, as it requires a lot of mental control, something that he seems to have lost a decent amount of due to the traumatic experiences that have happened to him over the last few years. So instead, he decides that he just wants revenge instead. He doesn't want to be a better actor, he doesn't want anything else other than to get revenge on the people that turned him into a monster. A true monster this time relative to how he saw himself before. And while we're talking about Clayface being a monster, the dude was an absolute monster when it came to being on the offensive with Batman. Within a relatively short amount of time, he managed to find out how to make himself crab claws and do some absolutely wild stuff with his powers. Some really, really cool stuff, even if it was slightly temporary, because he's still very new to this kind of thing. He is just a really cool villain in concept, and extraordinarily exciting. Shout out the one time Scooby-Doo ripped off Clayface with their Scooby Snack monster. I'm never going to let them live that one down. But with Matt thoroughly unhappy with the fact that he couldn't get revenge on his people, and the fact that Daggett is still moving to sell Renew You, he turns abusive on his only close friend and goes after Daggett publicly.
Through direct marketing because stores won't carry it due to its harmful side effects.
Well, that's absolutely untrue.
Fun fact, the dude who voices Daggett also voiced J. Jonah Jameson in the animated Spider-Man show. I just found it hilarious because I kept thinking of JJ this entire time. Now, Matt pretty much decides to attack Daggett and to also expose Renew as being addictive, as being dangerous, and everything Daggett was trying to keep from the public. And when Batman arrives on the scene, he tries his best to be empathetic to Matt. He realizes this is a man that had his entire life nearly ruined by a car accident, and then had it genuinely ruined by a formula that was promised to bring him back to his peak, but rather left him addicted and mentally a mess, and ultimately left him with more scars mentally than it did physically. And of course, when that didn't work, Batman resorted to the one thing he believed would, to try and remind Matt of exactly who he was and who he continues to be. And unfortunately, that led to him absolutely tweaking out in one of the scariest scenes this show had, where he is constantly transforming. But I think it's about right here where Matt stops actually having a mental breakdown and starts giving the performance of his life. You see, Matt himself has absolutely no weakness to electricity. Bruce proves this at the end of the episode, and rather Matt chooses to fake his death in order to finally move on and potentially get the life that he always wanted. Something that obviously was not given to him after the accident and after the Renew You formula.
See you around, Matt. A death scene so real, it fooled us all.
But of course, because Matty Boy is a certified villain now and probably a little bit insane, this isn't the last we're gonna see of him. Clayface is undeniably a tragedy. It is this tale of a rich businessman exploiting a man that is destitute, down on his luck, and desperate to cling on to the little bits of relevance he has in the social hierarchy of the world by being an actor. He's trying to cling on to his dream, and a rich businessman takes advantage of him. That is a tragedy. What is even more of a tragedy is that along the lines of him taking control of his life through Renew You, he ultimately ruined it because of its addictive potential, and because he ended up in a bad situation, he was turned into Clayface. And Clayface is a tragedy of moral failing, because once Matt Hagen became Clayface, he had a choice to make. He could have genuinely practiced his clay being. He could have practiced molding and performing. He could have lived a relatively normal and kind of cool life being Clayface. But I am willing to bet the kind of psychological trauma that comes along with being turned into a giant clay monster didn't exactly help his mental state when it came to choosing what he wanted to do. And so instead he picked to have revenge, not just on the mobsters that tried to end his life, but also on the man that got him hooked on Renew You and was trying to get the world hooked on a dangerous facial cream that would go on to probably destroy many other lives. And while Batman has his strict no-kill rule, Matt Hagen also didn't exactly display the notions of being a fully sane member of society anymore anyways. He kind of lost it near the end of the episode and was clearly no longer in a right state of mind. Even though I don't have a whole lot of qualms with him going after Daggett, especially embarrassing the dude publicly and wanting to get his get back, I do also recognize that Clayface is no longer mentally stable. He went on to hurt innocence that had absolutely nothing to do with his campaign against Daggett, and that's where he crosses the line. It becomes a tragedy of moral failing, not just a tragedy of exploitation. It's more of a story about when does the bullied become the bully. And in this situation, Matt Hagen stepped fully into the role that he hated so much. The next time that we see Clayface, he is actively and very poorly attempting to rob an institution for not only money, but medical secrets, because unfortunately for everyone involved, Two-Face is slowly destabilizing and deteriorating. soon enough he won't be able to hold his shape any longer. It's actually something we had a little bit of hints of throughout his first two-parter, when he would shapeshift into having the claws, for example. He would have to stop, as it not only put a mental strain on his body, but a physical one as well. And due to the unstable nature of the compound that he was forced to take an entire load of, he is pretty much on a 24-hour clock at all times, and he is going to destabilize at nearly every available moment post-midnight, unless he continues to get treatment by Dr. Stella Bates, who happened to be one of the former medical professionals back when Matt Hagen was still an actor. It is the classic case of unrequited love, in which when Matt Hagen was the actor and beautiful, the woman would have never been seen, but now that he is a monster and she has something valuable for him, all of a sudden Matt Hagen sees value in her. It's very reminiscent to the second time that we see Ink in Batman Beyond, except it's the inverse in that situation with the guy and the girl. But either way, this is what Dr. Stella's role is going to be throughout the episode, which is trying to heal Matt Hagen and not only allow him to no longer be the anthropomorphic blob of Clayface in his default state and fix his degeneration, but also allow him to stay in a stable Matt Hagen looking version of himself permanently, as well as being able to continue to shapeshift into whatever the hell he wants, because why not? And this episode presents a different type of tragedy, one of a person who still believes that the man she fell in love with prior to him becoming the monster exists, that Matt Hagen is still around, when in all reality, Matt Hagen isn't really around anymore, or at least the version she romanticized in her own mind. I would kind of argue, as I probably have before, that Matt Hagen was not always as unstable as he was, but he was always probably kind of a dick, just based on how he treated the people around him, even after the accident happened to him. Especially the one person that actively stood by him the entire time. I mean, she was straight up willing to throw her entire life away for this dude, not only to help him, but for the chance at an unrequited love. It's really sad, but at the same time, I mean, it's hard for me to not just look at you and be like, come on, bro, come on. Either way, Clayface is extraordinarily impatient with getting this cure, so instead of waiting until he is more stable or until a little bit of heat has backed off of him, he breaks into Wayne Tech and he is actively kidnapping one of the doctors while looking for a substance he needs to help stabilize himself. You know what the craziest part is? If bro just went to Bruce Wayne and asked him for it, I guarantee you Batman would have just given it to him. It's just the kind of Batman this version is. But instead, Clayface only saw one path to getting himself fixed, and that was to do what he is recently doing best at: stealing, thriving, and being a straight up menace. So Clayface ultimately does procure the substance that he needs, and is en route to hopefully, finally, truly fix himself. And it's going well for the most part. I'm not going to pretend to know any of the science behind it because it is comic book mumbo jumbo at best, but it's part of the charm of these types of shows. And while he was extraordinarily close to being finished and to just being able to be Matt Hagen, Batman of course steps in to stop all of this because Matt is dangerous. He's no longer really Matt. As a matter of fact, he is just Clayface. And the Doctor tries valiantly to stop him, but Batman is Batman. I mean, I don't know what she was thinking. And ultimately, Matt chooses to fight Batman over choosing to fully cure himself. He wants to get revenge on Batman, even as Stella is repeatedly asking him to chill out or stop. And I think this is where the true distinction between Matt Hagen and Clayface is made. He has almost like an identity split, and he is no longer Matt Hagen, but rather just Clayface. I know he announced it in the previous episode, but I feel like this is really the turning point in which he no longer acknowledges himself as Matty Boy.
Matthew, get back inside! You're absorbing the rain! Matthew!
And it was ultimately this lust for revenge against Batman and this desperate desire to beat the Bat that nearly led to Matt's death. And by nearly, I mean it did. Well, sort of. If there's one hard and fast rule about comic books, it's that if you don't see the body, the character's not dead. And even if you do see the body, they're still probably not dead. So when Matt absorbs too much rain and falls in the river, he is presumed dead and has ostensibly ruined Stella's life going forward. We never see her again, but it's safe to assume that being complicit in this many criminal acts will probably land her some form of probation and/or jail time, even if she pleads for like temporary insanity or something. She's probably not going to have a good life going forward for a man that only truly cared about himself, and I think that was true going long before the accident and long before him being Clayface. The tragedy in this episode is not necessarily for Matt Hagen, but for the death of who Matt Hagen was, and the death of whatever Stella's life could have been prior to him. I have made a point throughout this video to call out that Matt Hagen might not have always been such a good man, and that he probably had a lot of the tendencies that we've seen displayed throughout the show, just amplified once he ended up having a tragedy and becoming Clayface, or at least these impulses were buried deep below, as the way in which his stunt double reacts to him always suggested to me that he wasn't the kindest man on set to those who were working under him. He always had a bit of a grandiose sense of self, and well, I can have sympathy for him becoming Clayface, for him being faced with a life-altering facial deformity. It's hard for me to feel the same way when he is taking it out on the people around him. It is really hard. It is kind of a complex situation when you're dealing with mental instability, mental health issues, and emotions like this. It's not always going to be an easy and straightforward answer, but it was very much proven at the end of this episode that Matt Hagen, or at least the person he was, doesn't really exist anymore. The only person that exists is Clayface. That need for self-preservation above all else, and lust for battle above all else. The need to be self-centered and for Clayface to be the primary in every situation sticks through clearly. Whoever Matt Hagen was prior to this incident, prior to his car accident, prior to meeting Dagan, he doesn't exist anymore. It is now Clayface. And ultimately, it was his actions to chase Batman off that cliff that led to his demise. And the next time that we actually see Clayface is in the New Adventures of Batman. Completely new art style, completely somewhat shift in tone. Scarecrow got a lot scarier. Some of the elements of the show got a lot darker. The color palette definitely got a little bit darker. But outside of all of that, when we're introduced to this episode that does revolve around Clayface, we're actually introduced to a brand new character along with it, and one that serves as a pseudo love interest for Tim, that being Annie. Now, Annie is not the character's actual name, but that's the given name. Throughout the entire episode, Robin and Batman are at odds with one another because Robin wants more freedom, not only as a hero, but as a person, and Batman just wants to actually parent the kid that he has adopted, as this version of Tim Drake seems to take a lot of different character elements from different portions of the Batman mythos when it comes to Robin. And throughout this entire episode, he spends chasing Annie around and desperately trying to not only find her a home, but also find her a name and to help her remember who she is, as Annie is a little kid for all intents and catchphrases. Or I guess teenagers, since that's what Jim Gordon does mention earlier in the episode. They look like kids though, being so for real. Either way, Robin gets to know Annie and is actually the one to give her a name.
How about Annie? Okay.
And it was throughout the episode that Tim Drake was not only looking for a home for Annie, but also looking for a place for her to belong that isn't just on the streets. And that's when they run into Annie's psychopathic father, a really, really strong psychopathic father that desperately wants her back. And now I know you've got to be wondering at this point, Why am I talking about this in a Clayface episode for those of you who have never seen this episode? That was Clayface. The psychopathic dad is Clayface. And if you're having even more questions, don't worry, I'll answer them later. But for now, if you haven't seen the episode, I just want you to think about this because I find it funny. One of the things I really loved about this show was that it didn't shy away from the actual reality of what tends to go on in a lot of cities. For example, in this episode, while Tim is searching for Annie, he comes across a homeless family, one that has been pushed to the edges of Gotham and is hidden away from everyone else. Because if you don't see them, then you don't have to think about the homeless people around you at all times. And it's a really sad reality. And when Tim does find Annie, and he does end up making ground towards figuring out where she came from and getting her memories back, it's revealed to us that not only is the father Clayface, as I mentioned earlier, but it's also revealed that Annie herself is...
I am Clayface.
Annie is and isn't Clayface. She was originally split off from Clayface's sentience, I guess, in order to be like a drone. Clayface was stupidly weak after his fight with Batman and absorbing way more water than he probably should have, and he sent Annie out as a scout to hopefully find out where he was and how he could get a little bit stronger before coming back. And so now Clayface is missing a part of himself, a part of his sentience that he is desperately trying to get back. And you could argue that Annie represents the innocence that was left inside of Clayface. And that's why she was so quick to forget and so easy to be herself once she came back. And then of course, Clayface reabsorbs her, fights the Batman and Robin, and he loses. And in all honesty, he probably also ended up losing the last bit of innocence that he had himself. He probably ended up losing the only bit of Matt Hagen that might have been left in Clayface. You could see Annie as representing the innocence in Clayface. You could see Annie as representing him wanting a second chance at life, a second chance at doing things over again and at being better. And Annie deserved a second chance. To me, Annie was a sentient being. She thought for herself, she did not remember, and when she remembered being Clayface, she remembered being a distinctly different piece of the character. And so I do low-key agree with Robin at the end of the episode when he said, add on a murder charge to Clayface. Because when he took back Annie, when he snuffed out that last bit of innocence that he could have possibly had left, all in favor of, to be honest, I don't even know what anymore. He was low-key a little out of his mind during this episode, and his motivations outside of getting Annie back haven't been the clearest since I'm pretty sure he's back to being stable now. This was just an act of greed, an act of want, and an act of control. Something that Matt Hagen has been desperately lacking throughout the entirety of his time on this TV show. He has not had control over just about anything except for snuffing out the last bit of innocence that he could have possibly had.
Sometimes there are no happy endings.